Program Coordinator for the Kenai Community Library, and today I want to ask the patrons of the Kenai Library and all Kenai community members if they would help me with the project I have. The project that I have is, I think that it would be awesome if we all came together and made a quilt block and then made a quilt, a community quilt, that we would display at the library. I had this idea as I was making masks earlier this month, and I just thought it would be something cool to see if the community wanted to do as well. So I'm going to do a class today on quilt blocks to make sure that people understand it's really easy to make a quilt block. The quilt block we're going to make today is a 9-patch quilt block. This is what it looks like when it's done. As you can see, there's 9 different squares, and that's why it's called a 9-patch. You can either do it with a sewing machine, a rotary mat, rotary cutter, or you can use even needle and thread, and all you need is scraps. All the scraps I have here are from masks that I made for staff at the Kenai Community Library for when we reopen. And I thought it'd be cool to take the scraps left over from that, so that way we as a library would have our own quilt block. Okay. So in order to start our quilt block, we're going to make a pattern, and our pattern is going to be for a 3.5-inch piece of fabric. So what we need is our scissors and our ruler, and a piece of paper. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my ruler down here, and I'm going to make a mark at 3.5 inches. And then I'm going to go up here so I can make a straight line. And I'm also going to mark it at 3.5 inches. And then I'm going to come up to this side of my paper. Oh, gotta watch my needles there. And I'm going to mark 3.5 inches. And again, move it and mark 3.5 inches. Now you might ask why we're making it 3.5 inches. Is because our finished quilt block is going to be actually 9.5 inches. There's going to be a 1/4 inch seam allowance along each side of the block and each piece of fabric, because we have to sew a seam there, and therefore if you sew a seam for a 1/4 inch and another one at a 1/4 inch, then we're going to have our 3 inches, and by the time that we are done with our block and it's all sewn, we'll have a 9-inch block. So now that I have made my box, my 3.5-inch box, I'm going to take a good pair of scissors and I'm just going to cut out along my straight line. It's just like that. Now I have my 3.5-inch quilt block square pattern. Okay. So now that I have my little piece of fabric, this is my scrap and my pattern, I'm going to put my pattern over my fabric, and I'm going to take a couple of pins and I'm going to pin my piece of paper to my fabric. Try to make sure it doesn't move. It's really hard to do, but I know you guys can do it. And then I'm going to take my fabric scissors and I'm just going to cut right along my pattern piece. Now remember, when you're doing this method, you're going to need to have 9 of these. Doesn't matter if it's all different, if they're the same, if you've got 2 different pieces of fabric you want to use, as long as you have 9 squares that are 3.5 inches by 3.5 inches. So if you have a rotary mat, ruler, and a rotary cutter at home, you can also make your fabric squares this way. Now kids, if it's your mothers or your fathers, make sure you get their permission and make sure you get their help with it. So I've got my fabric laid out. I have a pretty straight line from 7 to 10.5. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure my fabric is flat, and I'm going to take my rotary cutter, my ruler, put it at my 7 line, and then I'm going to cut my fabric, and I'm going to go over to 10.5, and I'm going to make another cut because that is my 3.5 inches. Okay, and I'm going to get rid of my extra scrap here. And then, let's see here, so I'm at 9. So then I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, so 6.5 or 5.5. And I'm going to put my ruler, open up my rotary cutter, and I'm going to make another pass. And there we have our 3.5-inch fabric square. Remember, you're going to need 9 of these to make our quilt block. So now that we have our 9 fabric squares ready to go, we're going to lay them out in the arrangement that we want. So I think I want to put my cheetah print in the middle with 2 green, and then maybe we'll put a green in the middle, we'll put our brown there, and we'll put another green in the middle because I have a lot of green, and we'll put another cheetah print, and then we'll put our blue there. So now that we have the layout for our quilt block, we're going to start sewing them together. So I'm at my sewing machine. I'm going to take my first 2 blocks at the top, and I'm going to put them right sides together, and I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance, 1/4 inch seam right along here. So you put your presser foot down, and I'm just going to do a straight stitch. Just like that. Now I'm going to leave it here, and I'm going to grab my next pair, and I'm going to put it right sides together. Make it as even as possible, and it should be pretty even because you cut them all out the same way. And I'm going to put my presser foot down again. And what I'm using for my 1/4 inch line on this foot is this little line right here. I don't know if you can see that, but that's about 1/4 inch. Every sewing machine's a little bit different, so have your mother or father help you with it, or if you already know where it is on your sewing machine, that's awesome. And then I'm going to make another hem. And I'm going to take all 3 of these off. And I'm just going to go like that with our scissors. And then, so now that we have this, we're going to take our 3rd piece, and we're going to put it over our middle piece, because our middle piece was the green on this row. And then we're going to put it back into our sewing machine. And sew another 1/4 inch seam. So then I take my fabric scissors, and I very carefully cut them apart. And I have 1, 2, and 3. So for all of my hand sewers out there, I want to let you know how you're going to put your block together with all your fabric squares. So where we have our seams here, you can take your needle and your thread and you can do your 1/4 inch seams. Well, how am I going to know it's a 1/4 inch seam? I'm going to take this extra fabric square that I have and I'm going to turn it so it is wrong side towards me. I'm going to take my ruler, I'm going to take my pencil, and I'm going to draw a couple marks on all 4 sides at a 1/4 inch. And by doing this, I'm going to create lines for myself to stitch on. So now that I've got all my marks on all 4 sides, I'm going to go ahead, put my line, and then I'm just going to draw my line. So now I have a visual reference for taking my needle and thread and making my seams. Pretty cool, huh? So once you get all of your 9 blocks with your lines and you have it all laid out, remember how we laid it out at the beginning of the video, make sure that you always put your right sides together, and then you do your running stitch, which is just a straight stitch exactly like the sewing machine does. So you're just going to go in and out with your needle and thread. And you're going to go from this line to this line, and you can go all the way through. And then remember, because we're going to open it up and we're going to put a 3rd one, then you're going to put, again, your right sides together, and actually we'll say that that's our middle. So then we're going to stitch along here. So can you guys guess what the next step is? So now that we have our 3 pieces laid out, I'm going to take my top 2 and I'm going to put them together, and then I'm kind of going to nestle my 2 seams together. And nestling puts the 2 seams, I don't know if you can see it, they're kind of nestled in together. What that's going to do is going to make us really a nice end, and I'll show you just as soon as we can get this sewn. So again, right sides together, put my presser foot down, and then I'm going to sew another 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now that we have that sewn, and see what the nestle does? Gives you that really nice corner. We didn't quite nestle too good there. See, there's a little bit of an off, but you know what? That is a-okay. Nothing has to be perfect. Then I'm going to take my last piece and do the same thing. Nestle my 2 corners together. Make sure everything is right sides together. And then I'm going to put it into my sewing machine. Okay, then I'm going to cut that off. Cut all my little stringers off. And leave that one real quick because that was a lot there. And there we go. We have our 9 patch. So for all of my hand sewers out there, I want to let you know how you're going to put your block together with all your fabric squares. So now that, remember, we have it all laid out, we're going to flip it over, and I see I drew a line because you're going to have your lines and then you'll have your 1/4 inch seam that you just take your needle and thread and you sew it together. So if you guys have any questions or concerns, or you want to reach out to us and send us pictures of what your quilt block looks like before you open, you can email us, you can send us a private message on Facebook. Staff are in the building if you want to give us a call. And I hope you guys enjoyed our quilt project, and we hope that a lot of you guys will get quilting and get us blocks so we can have an awesome community quilt. See you guys later.